Hey everybody, Min Ship here with another video from Disney Sorcerer's Arena. So today we're going to be talking about whaling. So the way I want to kind of structure the conversation here is I'm going to give out 7 tricks, 7 things that I think are the most essential rules. They're not really commandments, but I guess you could call them that, on how to whale, on how to spend your money. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about how I evaluate things and how I see them, and what I'm going to do about spending my money going forward. And my hope is that it'll help you guys to be able to be smart about how you're spending, and most importantly, give you guys a little bit of food for thought if you're thinking about spending, especially if you're thinking about whaling. And then in the theory, something I want to do going forward is to kind of do like my little own offer review, because I know SHG continues to make really great videos on what to buy in the exchanges, and so I'll try my best to keep up to date with what's in the store. It probably won't be a daily thing because the deals don't change that frequently, but that's the idea. So without further ado, let's get right into it with rule number 1. Rule number 1, evaluate your time. Now, this seems like it's kind of a gimme, but here's the thing. You're spending money to avoid time. So, like if you're looking here at the Randall bundle, it's 80 Randall for $30. And my Randall, I happen to get him a lot from the Zerg packs in the last go round. But if I needed 80 will not get me terribly far. It'll get me most of the way to getting 5 stars because I'll unlock him with the 80. But I could also get him from the Grand campaign, and I could get him from all 3 campaigns. So is the 34 that I need, I mean plus some, I mean there are some other benefits, but is that going to be worth $30 to me? I'd say 34 if I was just farming him, and not anyone else, would probably take me a week at most. So is it worth me saving a week's worth of time to spend $30? Is $30 worth a week? So kind of like get a good evaluation of your time. So when you see something in the store, you can really say, oh, this is exactly like this. The difference in time that it would take me to get this is worth this much money. And that's like the first step. Figure out how valuable is your time. Because if your time is extremely valuable, as in like you're not going to be spending $10 for every hour you're going to save, because that's how much you get paid, but you're willing to spend maybe like $10 to save a week, it's worth, right? Get a good valuation of your time. So that's always, that is rule number 1. Once you kind of get a good handle on what you're willing to spend to save a certain amount of time, that will be the guiding factor on whether or not you're going to be actually spending that money. Rule number 2 is to set a budget. Now this is also kind of like a gimme one, but it's a lot harder for people to set a budget on a mobile game because these things are constantly changing. Like the Lion King event is a completely different price than the Incredibles event. Like this $50 for what? That's 160 shards versus $50 for 80 Jack versus $30 for 50 Mr. Incredible. So it's hard to like get a good budget, but that's something you don't look at how the game works. Think about like how much money you have, like what is your availability for that month, and I would set the budget every month or every week even. Like don't give yourself like, oh, like I've been able to spend $300 a month if you're going whaling or even more, and then like the next month you lost your job or something, but you still think, oh, I still have like $400 to spend. So like have some accountability with yourself, set a budget, and constantly be evaluating it. The worst thing you can do in the game is to not have a budget and then realize after the fact that you've spent $4,000. I know that happens to people with the Star Wars. That had happened with people with Star Wars, where they just started spending and they didn't realize how much they were spending. So then that kind of like goes into rule number 3, which is don't overspend. If you have the money, don't overspend. If you have the budget, that you're not going to get enough out of it from overspending, because then you just open up a can of worms where now every single pack is viable again, because you just have started ignoring the budget and you don't really care what it looks like. So those are kind of like the quick evaluation ones. Now, this is when we're actually getting into the meat and potatoes of whaling in this game. This is something I've seen people do wrong all the time. You'll see this because people will be spending, and then they're gonna come and they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, like I spent all this money on this character and now the character isn't good anymore, or I spent all this money and the spell got nerfed. The fact is that the game is always going to be changing. The meta is going to evolve over time. 2 years from now, if the game's still around, which I really hope it is, we're gonna look back and be like, remember when Frozen was meta? Because it's gonna be like so far back. There's gonna be so many different mechanics that are gonna come out since then that like those characters are suddenly gonna be useless, right? So don't expect every single investment you have to be worth it, and don't expect every single pack here to be worth it. Like, just because it's worth $50 doesn't mean it's a good pack. It means that they've decided it's worth $50. So I know it's like a really, really difficult thing because you're spending money and you want it to always be valuable to you. But the fact is that the games just don't work like that. Like, you're not going to get everything that you like. Every time you spend is not always going to be worth it. As a really good example here, like this gear pack here, I don't need any of these tiny cinder brooms. So even though it's only $2, like it's more for the money and for these alpha runes, right? The support pack is a really good example of one that's not worth it to me. Even though there's a chance that it might have some characters and it might get some genie tokens out of it that might be helpful, all this stuff is not worth $5 to me, right? So even though it's there, even though it's a pack, I'm not expecting it to be worth my money. And that's why I constantly evaluate everything that I would ever spend on. This then is a really good lead into kind of like the hardest thing. Spend for fun, not for competition. Now, what am I actually really trying to get at here? Well, the thing is that there isn't really like a super competitive, like you're not going to be League of Legends like $100 million competition with everything all told. You're not getting any of that here. So the competition aspects are like Sorcerer's Tournament, PvP, Conquest. I would say spend for fun. Like if you look at this and you're like, man, like I have $50, but I freaking love Jingles, or I'm a huge Dr. Facilier fan. Or like I think that the Big Bad Wolf outfit is absolutely hilarious. Well, then if you have the $10 and you think it's fun, like go for it. Don't do it just because you're trying to get ahead in the game. You're going to be disappointed and you're constantly going to have to be spending in order to keep up. But if you're spending because you think something's fun, if you're like a huge, like whether or not the character is even good, like say you love Rafiki. Well, Rafiki's not a great character, but if you want to get him, go for it. If it's worth it to you because you're a huge fan of Rafiki, then absolutely just do it. Like if you're always worried about like whether or not a character is going to be good or whether or not a team's going to be worth your investment, you're always going to be chasing the meta, and you're constantly going to be out of money. And so being able to spend smart and not just spend because you think it's going to be something that's going to have dividends down the line. You're going to have a lot more fun with the game. You're going to enjoy playing it, and it's not going to feel like it's a job. The more you try to have fun in the game, the more you're actually going to get out of it. The whole point of the game is to enjoy it. It's not to spend your money. If you are going to be spending your money, then do it in a way that's fun for you. So like, for instance, I'm a huge fan of Stitch. Stitch is one of my favorite characters in all of Disney. So I will definitely be spending on Stitch because it's fun whether or not he's good. I literally don't care whether he's good. He's going to be one of my top invested characters by far. So this, okay. I have a whole video on this. I'll probably update it at some point. But the FOMO, or the fear of missing out, is how they get you to spend money. Really good example of this. Super good example of this. They just ran the Toy Story 3 Villains event, which had Chunk, Big Baby, and Matzo. And are they good? Maybe. Jury's still out on that one because they can't beat Frozen and they can't beat Incredibles. But they're still useful and they're pretty interesting on Conquest. But that doesn't mean they're good. I would argue that it means that they're just interesting. So if you went for it, and you're like, wow, I really hope that these characters are good, and then you went all out, just because you didn't want to miss out on a possible future meta, like that inner fight that you have between yourself on whether or not something's worth spending is also going to be on whether or not you feel like you're going to miss out by having it. Like, it was really hard. It was a hard decision because Elsa's good, and so like, am I going to chase the meta? Am I going to try to unlock them and then get a ton of gear on them? Or am I going to stick with what I was doing? Am I going to be afraid that I've missed out on like the next big thing by not having Frozen, which I kind of did, but I evaluated my time. I evaluated the amount of money I was willing to spend. And I was like, I can do a little bit to unlock Elsa, but I'm not going to do a lot of it, and I'm just going to do it the long way. But that fear of missing out on Elsa was very rough, because a lot of me wanted to unlock her right away to make content with her, to you be able to use her, and it's like that fight you have between you wanting to do something just because they're available and they're there, versus you really like you actually care about the characters and you want to have them. It's a balancing act that you're definitely going to have to figure out. But definitely that's gonna be how they get you. It's like it's a limited time event. Like this is the only time you're gonna get to see them before you really get to before they come back for another 3-4 months. Who knows? So ignore FOMO. If you're whaling, always evaluate. Don't just do it because it's a limited time event and you're not sure if it's gonna come back. And then the last real tip here is know when to stop. This is a harder one to really put a number on, but it's really important for you to know when to stop spending. What is your end goal? Know when enough is enough. Know when your budget's been pushed a little too far. The game will continue to be expensive to play at a very, very, very high level. If you're always chasing the meta, if you're always spending all your money, well, then know when to stop. Know what your stopping point is. I know people that stopped because of RuneGate. I know people that stopped because Frozen came out and it was expensive and it just like kind of took over the meta, and if you didn't have it then you were toast. Like those kinds of things. Like know what your criteria is to stop and not stop playing. If you're not having fun anymore, it's a really great reason to stop spending. If you don't want to spend, if you just don't want to spend anymore, like that's totally reasonable. But you have to know when to stop. You have to have that in your mind, because otherwise you're just gonna keep going forever. A really good example of this is in another game that I played, Disney Heroes, and the sad thing is that people that are spending to keep up, like they just keep spending. People have dropped off over time, but like for the most part, it's just like this whole thing of you're constantly chasing the meta. You're constantly trying to keep up with these guys. Like it's gonna be hard to keep up no matter how much money you spend. You're gonna always be behind somebody. So you have to know what you have to know when you personally are going to stop, because otherwise you'll just keep spending all the time, and then you'll be 5 years later and have spent 20K, like in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. So like if you follow those tips, again, like I'll just run through them really fast here. Like rule number 1, have an evaluation criteria for your time. Know what is worth spending on and what isn't. And once you kind of have a good evaluation, then set your budget. And then your budget is going to be your guiding force behind, do you have money to spend, and is it worth it? Because you've now created worth, you've created what your criterion are, and now don't overspending. Like stick to your budget. when you have an investment or when you have something you're investing in, don't expect everything that they give you to be worth it. Don't expect every event to be perfect. Don't expect every new character to be released to be meta. Some of them are just going to be for fun or have interesting characteristics and be worth theory crafting on. But if you're not expecting it to be worth it, you're sticking to your budget, you're evaluating every time, then you're going to be spending for fun, not because you're trying to chase the meta. And you're always going to be satisfied with what you have because you're not worried about, just because it's a limited time event, that you're missing out on something perfect. You're going to spend because you want to. You're going to spend because you think, because it's worth your time and your money, and not because this is like you only have 10 days to invest in the Incredibles team. And then the last thing is to know when you're done spending. You can, or when to stop playing in general. It can get out of hand really fast, and $20 a month adds up if you play for 2 years. So know when to stop. Know what you're up against, and know what you're trying to do. And I really hope like some of these tips help you guys whale harder and whale smarter. I'll show you guys a little bit about how I evaluate things. For me, limited time events are really, really rough. I tend to not invest in them unless I absolutely think that it's worth it, and I usually just invest enough to unlock, because then I can spend my time on finishing off the rest of them when they come back. So like Incredibles, I personally really like Dash as a character, so that was one of the spend for fun. He ended up being a really great character, but I really liked what he had. And so I got him 7 stars, but then the rest of the team, I was like, you know what, like, it'll happen when it happens, and I'm not gonna hate myself for not having everybody at 7 stars for a while. Same thing with Zerg. Like, downtown villains are good, but then I was like, you know what, Frozen's better, so I'm just gonna invest in Frozen. And even though the Zerg event is back and I'm not gonna get a lot out of it in this go around, I don't feel like I'm missing out, because I know what I'm working on, and I know that I'm spending smart. For me, $50 for this seems worth it, but I just don't have the $50 to spend, and I'm willing to wait for Zerg. So some of these other ones are good though. Like the stones, the $20 stones here is worth it. Will I buy it? Probably not for me, but it's still good. It's still something that I would consider. But some of these other ones, like Elastigirl's Farmable, is 50 shards for $30 worth it. And then I'll go in and I'll look at like where can I farm Elastigirl? I can't remember. I think it's in one of the elite campaigns. So if I go here, it's like $50, and I can get her. Between this, I'll average 2 every single time. So that's 8. So I'll get like roughly 4 a day. Plus this bonus, but roughly 4 a day. So 50 shards is going to be somewhere around, like, for argument's sake, we'll just say 15. It'll take like 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks to get that is 2 weeks worth $30 to me. Not for a character that I'm not going to use every day. And so I have that evaluation. I have a budget in my head that I'm really trying hard to stick to as much as possible. And so, like, yes, is it difficult to keep up without spending a lot of money? Absolutely. But if you're willing to be smart about it, then you're not going to be in a place where you're suddenly regretting having spent more money than you thought you would ever spend in a mobile game. Now, if you're just buying everything, I'll have a whole separate video on it for you guys if you just are going crazy with spending. But this is mostly for like the small whales, the fat dolphins, I think is what Cozy calls them. The people that have money to spend, that have a decent budget for the game. I'll say I'll have a whole thing on what to actually spend on, whether, like, both for if you're spending on everything and if you're spending very little. That'll be a whole separate video. But I really hope that these tips really help you guys. As always, if you have any questions, you can feel free to Discord me. I have a trailer I think I'm going to be making, is what they're called, for the YouTube channel. And there are going to be links to my Twitch channel, which is where I've been streaming. And there's also going to be really awesome links to my Discord, where you guys can talk directly to me. I know there's a lot of other YouTubers that have the Discord set up, but I finally set mine up. And I have a lot of plans for that one in the future. So keep up with that, guys. Might have another video coming out tomorrow. I don't know yet. I'm really excited about it, though. If it comes out tomorrow or if it comes out on Tuesday. But thanks so much for checking out. If you have any other video requests, or if you have any thoughts on like how you evaluate your whaling if you are spending, feel free to drop them in the comments, or send me a link in Discord. Love to chat with you guys. With that, I will see you guys in my next video.